slightly different approach. So it's not your usual news reporters in the room, but media personalities who host the various programs on radio and television. To my left, Joseph Kador, representing GBN. Next to him, Aruna Neptune of Power FM. On the other side of the room, we have Andre Donald of Real FM and Brenda Batiste, host of the television program Perspectives. I want to at this time acknowledge the many stations that are broadcasting this live event to help maximize listenership and viewership. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Without any further ado, I will now invite Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell to provide an opening statement, following which we will go directly into the engagement with the media representatives here today. Prime Minister?
Thank you, Philo, and of course, a pleasant good afternoon to all our sisters and brothers of the media who are present with us today, and of course, to the listening audience throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and PD Martinique. I think I see this as a very important session this evening, this afternoon, simply because it's coming just before the presentation of the 2022 budget. It also coming just before Santa Claus gets to us. So in that sense, we could be in a joyous mood and a serious mood with economic data and results being presented at the same time. I think also it is coming at the heels of having gone through a second wave of COVID-19 not long ago, and the fact that the country appears to have gone through the worst of that particular phase is certainly another major plus that we can all record at this particular session today. I think it's also important for me to make the point that while we have appeared to have the control of this period of infection, that we should not drop our guard, and there's some evidence of this, that we are beginning to feel a sense of being too comfortable and relaxing probably too much. I want to just report also that while we are convinced the vaccination figures continue to be not as good as we would like it to be, but at this stage we have over 34,000 persons fully vaccinated, and a few thousand, but 7,000 or 8,000 I believe, of partially vaccinated persons. And there are some persons like me who are ready to take my booster. So we have additional protection as we go forward. I want to say also that the government continues to ensure that we have vaccines available. We have about an average about 2,000 vaccine of Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and of course Johnson & Johnson. We also expect supply of vaccine from Argentina very soon, AstraZeneca that is, and of course we expect from the United States government's initiative to have a supply of Pfizer and Moderna vaccine not long from now. It is also important for me to recognize the tremendous work of the frontline workers that have brought us through this very difficult time in our history, and to make the point that a number of persons have been asking us, what can we do for our frontline workers who have given almost 2 years of their life during this period of this COVID-19. And we're certainly examining methodology and ways we can, particularly as we face the Christmas season, how we can provide some sort of approach to say that we're thanking them, more than just saying the words, doing something that will make them feel that their sacrifice was worthwhile. I acknowledge also the support of the diaspora community abroad. I just want to also mention that we have some critical initiative in the health sector that worth mentioning. The engineers are currently working on installation of the top-of-the-line CT scan, which was generated by the government and people, also supported and bought by the government and people of Grenada, and which will be of tremendous benefit to the healthcare system. Also, infrastructure work is on the way, ongoing in bringing what we consider a very important service. That is the question of dialysis of services, because we're seeing more and more of our people needing that particular service. I do also want to make the point that we have a second COVID-19 stimulus package ongoing, and so far over $9 million have already been disbursed as we're speaking. And of course, over 1,500 persons have already benefited from various areas of assistance provided under that support program. The staff at the COVID-19 Economic Secretariat continue to process applications, and the same is being done at GDB and NIS, which are also responsible for managing some aspects of the benefits available under the stimulus package. I think it's important when you talk about intervention that to mention that for a couple of months now, with a short intervention, we are having over 3,200 workers on the road throughout the length and breadth of the country, what we call debushing gangs around the country. These persons will be continuously see employment and opportunity for right through the next 2 months in our country, and we may begin also some aspects of it in January-February period. Understanding, of course, they are the most marginalized in the country, and that there are people having to face the prices as they appear to be increasing at this time. I just also want to make the point on the sister island of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Major infrastructural work continues. The Cherry Hill Road was just completed. Limley and the road project is now underway. Bishop College is progressing nicely and it's on target for completion in March next year. A large part of our economic recovery will depend heavily on tourism sector. We have already seen an increase in the number of visitors arrivals, and with the addition of new services by some airlines and resumption of services by others, we expect arrivals to further increase in the near future. Cruise tourism has also restarted and a number of calls already being booked. I could go on and on, but I think this is a period of time for the media personnel. We give them the opportunity to ask questions or to comment as they see fit, and as you more, of course, the audience listening may be getting an opportunity to also be with us.
Thank you very much.
So I turn it back to you, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for that opening statement. Members of the media, the floor is now open. Prime Minister likes cricket, so who's going to open bat here this afternoon?
I'll go first. Prime Minister, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And it's great to be here. In the interest of full disclosure, I want you to know that my questions this afternoon, the questions are coming through me, but they are really from the viewers of Perspectives.
Sure,
I reached
sure.
out to the viewers to try to get questions, what they want to hear from you at this time. So, let's bat. I'm bowling. Prime Minister, there have been questions about your age and your longevity in office. What is the single most important reason that you can tell the Grenadian people as to why you should be re-elected as an MP and as Prime Minister?
Well, I don't know that age is the critical factor. for one being a representative. If that was the case, then it means that people elected should only be between 18 and 30, probably no more than that, because they are the youngest in the country. So clearly that can't be seriously the consideration. I would say the one who base it on the question of aptitude to the work, clearly also the mind functioning effectively, because some of us are young, but our minds are old in many respects. And some of us may be considered not young, but our minds could be very young. So it is about ability to function effectively in providing the kind of vision and support that the country requires. And that goes across the board. It has nothing to do with a political organization. It's fundamentally, philosophically, that's what it should be. I think also one has to have a vision for what is the country needs are supposed to be. The fact is, during our period of service, this country consistently has seen development, particularly after 2013. In the height of the worst period of economic activity and downturn in the region, we have seen Grenada being one of the countries and has been producing economic stimulus benefits to its population while paying salaries every single month and on time. So I think this is key, and getting the economy going again in the face of the stimulus. So the combination of the factors of ability to do things that the country required, I believe that's how people have to judge a government, and not how, whether you are 50 years or 40 years or 44 or 75 or whatever. I don't, in fact, I think in anything you're doing, maybe a combination of experience, and that means people have gone through the mill, so to speak, is necessary. So you could be young and have gone through several permutations of development and, of course, activity. At the same time, you could be not very young, but have done very little in your life in terms of managing a serious economy or doing things of a nature of building a society. So I think that is what the criteria is about. Not about me. I've signaled already. I'm satisfied. I've given enough service and sacrificed enough. And I am very anxious to depart the scene and be an onlooker, and also to give my expert advice, because with that level of experience that I have, not just in politics, in business, in sports, because even up to recently, the West Indies cricketers, who they call, they're still calling me up to last week about things that they want to do and to give them advice and so on. They're looking forward to the day I leave this job to be using me in that capacity. So it's not about age, it's about your ability to function, to think, and to help with development.
Quickly follow up, as you mentioned leaving the job. You did indicate, you did signal in the parliament recently that the upcoming elections will be your last election. Yeah. So naturally, the item of succession enters into the fray. What can you tell us? The NNP being a strong political brand in Grenada, where are you at this time with that?
You see, it's unfortunate that they took some announcement of a leader of one political party and then question about succession of another. NNP has been always planning its succession. If you are going to be in charge of captain of a cricket team and you don't plan for succession, that team will die. If you are in business and you're the manager or owner and you don't plan for succession, it's an ongoing thing. You don't wait until you're ready to hang up your bat, so to speak, that you're talking about new leadership. Look at what has happened with the NNP. And I think this is something people seem to have missed, because the focus is about the leader. It's a team. Keith Mitchell could never do what the country has been experiencing if he didn't have enormous critical support among very able and visionary persons around him. So I think it's important to record this. The fact is, when we won 2018 government, what did we do? We appointed a number of persons in the Senate who are considered to be much younger than even the so-called NDC leader now. Right? You remember Kim George, you had Jude Cadet, you had other persons in the team. Simon Steele is not considered to be any person of middle age yet. And you had a number of persons. You had Katisha Williams, young lawyer, and so on. So we had a number of persons in the government elected. Kate Lewis is far younger than the present leader of the NDC, right? We have also Emmeline Pear, who's considered a youthful person in many respects. She's there. We also have Kendra Stewart, who is now, as you know, is now having her third baby. And she's definitely a young person in every respect. And you look around the team and you see a lot of youthfulness among members of the team. And I'm not just talking age, I'm talking the ability to function and to make contribution at a certain level. So the issue of succession has been there. So that's why it's not difficult for me to see. It is easy for me to see. This will be my last term. And the good thing, Brenda, is I feel relatively healthy. Of course, God's the one has that control over this. I sometimes when I hear people talking about age, I'm in the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning, doing an hour and a half of exercise. I hope every young person follows that example, but doing all the exercises that I can do. So I keep myself physically in good shape. So I'm able to hope and pray at the end of my period of service that I have the energy, and that's what I want. I don't want to leave when I could hardly make a serious contribution by helping other people. And there are other things I want to do. I said I want to write my memoirs. I have been offered chairs in a couple of institutions to do things. I could still teach a course or two in mathematics and so on. I just got a copy of my dissertation, a PhD dissertation on age regression analysis, and I got to see a copy of that, and it was refreshing just to start reading through what I developed that has been used by a lot of people mathematically and so on. So I feel good, and I am extremely hopeful that the country is on a good path, and that if we continue to work together, despite our differences, I welcome, for example, the NDC finding a political leader. I always say openly that a government is a better government when it has a strong opposition. I've been convinced about that. I've always said that, and therefore NDC finding a leader, hopefully that can solve some of the fundamental weakness, may not be a bad thing at all for the country. So that I would never have difficulties with this and so on. So we are moving forward as a party, and we're continuing to do so. There's one more year, I believe, left in government. We could go up to June 23rd, in 2023, but that's not, usually I'm not the type of person that go overtime in my batting, as you just referred.
All right, we'll take a question now from Aruna Neptune. Aruna? Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. PM, and good afternoon to everyone viewing and listening. I'm happy Philo made mention of the fact that we are radio hosts, and of course, let me just say that I am not a journalist. I am a radio host, and my questions this afternoon basically came from the listeners of my ladies' room, etc., and interacting with folks daily on social media. So I might be a little bit long, bear with me, but it is to do, and like I said, I'm not, this isn't an interview for me, we're having a conversation.
Yes.
And it's to do with what is basically happening now, what people are concerned about now, which is electricity and gas price. And I'm going to use myself as an example. Now, going from $250 a month in electricity to $465, nothing new, same old, and it's like over the top. And every month it's going up higher and higher. So We've heard from Honorable Gregory Boeing. We heard the explanation given. We listen to the news. We know what's happening in the world regarding oil prices. We understand all of that. We heard the explanation from the manager of GrenLec as well. But what we have not heard is how government, seeing that government now owns GrenLec, is going to help cushion the effects. Because a little old lady said to me, she usually pays $50, $60 maximum. And she almost had a stroke when she saw her bill at $170. Now we understand the increases here and there. I could understand $20, $30, let me say $50. But from $250 to $460, the explanation given, it does not sit well with, and I'm sure the rest of the population. Because when your pocket hurts, you hurt. And I'm sure you're fully aware as well, everything is escalating in the supermarkets. So that's the first one. 2, gas price. It seems as though gas will almost be an adult because it's $17, $18 pretty soon, that's an adult. How government also taxes gas. Government owns GrenLec. How and when would we see government stepping in to help us cushion the effects of the high prices in gas and the high electricity bills?
Okay, I think, Erna, let me say this. You posed a problem of increasing cost of certain items to the public. No one could even think that that is not the case. So what you're stating is you posed a problem of increasing cost of certain items to the public. No one could even think that that is not the case. So what you're stating is an absolute fact, because I see my bill too. And of course, if it is high as far as I'm concerned, then it will be considered more so to most people. So clearly what you have stated is a problem. What I think you really want is what government is going to do about it. So I don't think we're in denial of the problem. I think we all, and I think you would hear a lot from the Minister of Finance on Friday, outlining specific, giving far more detail than you gave in many other areas of increasing prices. And of course, government, then he would talk, because in life, it's very easy to talk about a problem. The question really is, what are you doing about it? What room do you have to deal with it? I think that is the key. And government, accept, Aruna, its fundamental responsibility to deal with any pain that exists in the population. That's why we were elected. There's some things we can do or something we may not be able to do. But we certainly cannot put our hands up in the air and try and say, well, it's just the world price and the world distance. Okay, that's the case, but you have a responsibility. So let me point out that I think one major factor that we all must come to terms with is the question of the additional costs you see now. As you know, the basic electricity price is based on the non-fuel charge, right? And fuel charges. Non-fuel has been fixed. It's the non-fuel prices that has increased. You know, the fuel prices, sorry, the factors that is correlated to cost of electricity. So clearly, if you have to deal with that problem, you have to look at both the non-fuel price and the fuel cost at this time. Remember in 2018, the price of fuel was even higher than it is now, because it was 18 plus. It has reached 18 plus. It's not the highest it has been, not 2018, 2008, sorry. When the NDC was in office, 2008, 2009, 2010, I believe it would start going down in 2010. So it was high. So the price of electricity was considered to be very high because it was tied, and nothing has changed in terms of the non-fuel price and so on, kept it constant. The question, therefore, what has caused the bills to be much higher? Remember, because of lockdown, we are home literally all day. I found that out. In fact, one person brought their bill to me and was saying, well, the price was bigger per kilowatt was higher then in 2008, and how come my bill was not as high? So I say, you didn't look at the other thing. How much fuel did you use? When they compared the two, they realized they used about twice the amount. So one of the problems related to the high cost is the fact that we have been home. I myself as Prime Minister sometimes I've been home almost every single day in a particular month. So if I have a lot of kids home, they'll be using the TV and everything, and they're in the refrigerator often as ever. Everything is being used more. So that's a factor. So that was I'm just stating what the problem is and giving an idea. Now, clearly, I want to say that the government will move to put a fixed price on the cost of gasoline, right? That will be announced on the budget on Friday. So I don't want to upstage the Minister of Finance, right? So expect some relief. It means, therefore, Aruna and others, that the government will be having to subsidize the cost. In other words, we'll have to take a hit, so to speak. And remember, we need revenue to run the country. Government does not get much money from income tax because most people are exempted from income tax from $36,000 upward. So we have to be careful, but government is prepared still because of the seriousness of the situation to cap the price of electricity and suffer the consequences financially. The case of electricity, what many of us don't know, that in costing electricity price for electricity services, the government then, not the NNP government, the government then in 1994, put on the question of VAT on electricity, they decided that they would put no VAT on the first 99 kilowatts. And we kept it there that way. Now, so if you want to do something about electricity costs, it means, therefore, you might have to increase that VAT-less amount. So the Minister of Finance, again, will announce on Friday what that amount will be. So if somebody's bill was, say, 300 kilowatts, or let's say 4, the first 99 right now, you don't have to pay VAT. But the other 300 plus, you'd have to pay VAT. So if he raises it to about 300 kilowatts or VAT for VAT purposes, it means that you would only pay under only 100. That's one way. The other approach, and they're working on numbers right now, because everything you do, colleagues, remember, you have to see what is the shortfall in revenue. So we have to be careful. We can't just blindly do things. Now, since the non-fuel charges include the question of taxes and so on, but there's a process to deal with that. We can now also, if we wish to, you could deal with the VAT issue by itself. You could also deal with the non-fuel price also. But there are processes to deal with that. So the government will wish to also consider that the Minister of Finance would also be dealing with this. Or you may just decide to deal with the non-fuel prices, right? And not touch the VAT. So that's a different approach. So that announcement, I hope I have showed you. And there are other things that we're going to be doing as far as energy is concerned. But we are very convinced that the present situation is not nice, and that we as government must do something about it. And we are going to be dealing with this. Including also the question of prices of certain goods done. We have now gone to the supermarket, we've identified a number of basic items. Remember, sugar, rice, flour, and so on have no VAT. So any price increase you see there would have to come from overseas in the market, nothing to do with government taxes and so on. So that's an area what we have to, so we will be dealing with prices in the shop also. But we need the press. Because you and I know when government moves and reduce VAT to decrease the price of something on the retail store, sometimes some businesses do not pass it on. And the next thing you hear the people say the government lied to them, when in fact, it just means that increase in profit. So we need to have, if we're going to move to deal with prices, we need a high consumer protection agency and a vigilance there. And the people have to report, because we'll indicate if we drop the price and say an item is cooking oil, and we say this is the amount we look at, it means that the price must be equated with that of the reduction. So people should know. We'll point out to them. If they go to the store, this is what it should be. It shouldn't cross this threshold. So we're going to need the public, we're going to need the media to help us to deal with this problem.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Colleagues, listeners, viewers, we take a quick break here to address a slight technical problem, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We hope we have resolved that issue and that the audio is much clearer for you listeners and viewers now. So it is the Prime Minister's in-person engagement with members of the media. If you're just joining us, we have Brenda Batiste, Andre Donald, Aruna Neptune, and Joseph Kaddour in the room. And Mr. Kaddour will now take the floor. Joseph, go right ahead.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm going to piggyback after Brenda's question, as questions being asked, where to from here for the Prime Minister. But I would want to ask you, though, after all is said and done, what in your estimation would you determine to be your legacy, having been literally the elderly statesman here? And thereafter, there's been a number of issues as it relates to pension, the issue of pension, and many have argued that government, not necessarily NNP, government has not had the willingness to commit itself to restoring pension. With that being said, and you're literally at the twilight of your political career, first comment on your legacy and whether or not that issue, in any way, you see it staining your legacy.
Joseph, I welcome the opportunity to deal. First of all, the question of legacy. Let me say this. I would love to be remembered for a period in service in government as one of service to the people of this country. One of being approachable and one who is prepared to meet with anyone or their request. I value this a lot, and the question of love for people. That, I believe, if I have this as seen as these characteristics for my period of service, I would consider that to be a major, major plus. And of course, under that, a lot of other things specific comes into play. Unfortunately, I think we have not done a good job with explaining this whole pension thing. We do not have a pension issue. The pension issue has been resolved with the unions. They have agreed on that, let me tell you. So there is something associated with the pension, but the pension agreement, it says this, and I had to tell the police officers when I met them, over 400 of them last week at the Trade Center. The agreement is, if you reach the retirement age or you want to retire before, because there's a period of service for retirement, you can retire, and as long as you sign the document, you will get 70% of your last salary, period. So that anyone does that, they get 70% of your last salary. It's a combination of NIS and government. What is unresolved is the question of when do you start to look at, because that in the old system of pension, you get 66 2/3. So government is agreed to give more than the old pension agreement. What is in dispute is the fact that if you want to go back to 1958 and talk about paying all those persons, that we said we have to start at a particular period, because we are not responsible, as you know, for removing pension of workers, right? And we are saying it is difficult for any government, not just NP government, to have to agree to it. It means you're talking $1 billion payment. And we're saying that that is in dispute, and that has been taken to court by the unions. They took it to court. So there is no dispute at this point in time. The pension numbers have been agreed to, and the issue of the back payment for persons who serve for years and continue to do so, that is the one that is unresolved. Now, what I say to workers is simply this. You're retiring, or you have retired. Sign the document, collect your 70%. The court case goes forward. If the government loses, then you have no money to collect, additional. So I don't see much of a dispute. In effect, I would say that that might be an important part of my own legacy, in the fact that I had nothing to do with removal of pension for workers. I had nothing to do with it, and I've always signaled that was fundamentally not right, while not having the opportunity to deal with the problem because of the financial constraints. But after years of negotiation, we have concluded an agreement, and that is where we are. So if government had the funds and we could have paid, we probably would say, well, forget whether it's illegal or not legal, and let's just pay, because the workers are here, they're going to spend their money back in the country, the government will generate revenues from expenditure and activities in the country. But we simply will not be able to meet that extreme payment if the court rules, we'll have to agree on some form of method of payment over years. So.
Another major issue there, Mr. Prime Minister, coming from the teachers' union, is the issue of the regularization of the teachers. And in more recent times, they've literally accused government of not being actively engaging and wanting to resolve the issues for whatever reason. What's your comment on that?
We have done that. We attempted to resolve it. It's not a simple matter, of course. You know, one of the main reasons we have and it's just not just teachers, huh? You have nurses too, and you have other public servants. So it's really the public service as a whole. So we understand the concerns of the workers. The problem is how do we deal with it and not put ourselves in a position that it affects us negatively. Joseph, one of the reasons we are able to do all the stimulus package today and to buffer things is because of the structural adjustment program and the sacrifices made not by NNP, by the whole country, to understand we are in problems and we agree on certain rules, the question of the size of the public service. Now, if we did not do that, no, the amount we have got serious resources already. And that's why we're able to do a number of things that we have to do. But one of the things I'm looking at what we can do with the frontline workers has to do with, we expect to get another 25 million US early next year in the first quarter from international organizations. And I've always said to people, this is like grant. It's not a grant, it's supposed to be a loan, but it's so soft, it's almost considered a grant because it's 40-year loan. 25 million, as you know, is quite a lot of resources there. It's 40-year loan, 0.75% interest, so it's like zero, almost zero. 10 years grace, and I always tease my colleagues, I say, I won't be there to pay it all, you're gonna have to pay it. And so 10 years grace. So for the next 10 years, you don't have to pay anything. So that resources are coming. Now, if we did not make this time, we go padding people to payroll, making it full time, while it's sometimes morally correct based on what has happened to some of the workers. If we did that, it will give us, we would not get the kind of resources that we now have available to do a number of things. But we are, in fact, contract workers. That's another plight we're facing in the system. It's just not fair. I speak to a lot of these workers, and I don't think it is right for us to say it is not fair. What can we do? We're also looking, the Minister of Finance, hoping to make some announcement during the budget period about contract workers, the fact that they should have been getting the increases that government other workers got. And we should be doing some additional things and correcting some of the problems they face. And the problem with the teachers and regularization. How can we together agree on some middle formula instead of saying, just put everybody in, we can't do this. Because in the end, the teachers will get hurt, we will get hurt, the country will get hurt. So I'm saying we agree there's a fundamental problem that we're facing, and we expect to take some decisions on that soon. The Department of Public Administration, the Ministry of Finance, and we all are working together. Another discussion over this last week. And what can we do? What can we offer those workers that are treated unfairly in going forward? So that's another serious issue that I want to commend the question again, Joseph.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We go over now to Andre Donald. Andre, good evening to you.
Secretary. And good evening, Mr. Prime Minister. How are you, sir?
I think I'm all right.
Great. Prime Minister, you've seen Grenada through many, many challenges. Ivan, Emily, depression, world crisis, now global pandemic. Explain to the Grenadian people how you believe these challenges have served to make you the leader you are today.
Well, I think one could talk about this philosophically, not just with a leader. I think the human being that have gone through struggles, that have faced the odds, fall down, get up, have to deal with the worst of circumstances, sometimes your own personal lives, but fight it through, not give up. And has passed that difficult stage and move forward. Certainly would help you, give you tremendous and experience that will improve you as a person and improve the decision-making process. I believe I'm a far more effective person at communication and with the people of the country today than I was 20 years ago. The things that used to get me upset and make me react 20 years ago, and some people call me, Prime Minister, I don't like to see how you're looking on TV. You're looking too vexed. I don't get vexed very easily now because I've seen it all. So I think it has certainly fortified me. And these challenges, when you remember, Ivan, I don't think anyone would want to go through that again. When I got up that morning and looked around and I see the whole of Grenada because it was flattened, I could not believe my eyes. And you felt helpless. The question is, where do you start? I remember driving up to Morris, my constituency, and up on the hill, and I looked down, and I couldn't be. It's like when you have a matchbox and you just smash it in your hands. It was tough psychologically. I mean, I told you it had a lot of impact on me psychologically. And I remember Prime Minister Manning, I always remember him. He came here. And the man came in, the airport was not open, so he landed on a helicopter in Busheshu. And Patrick was in my house in Happy Hill. They sit with me. And the first thing he said, let me tell you, Keith, I am not here as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago by itself to visit the Prime Minister of Grenada. It is Patrick coming to see his brother Keith and to make sure that you're all right. I remember 6 o'clock coming, there's no lights in the bush. I said, Patrick, you had to go. He wouldn't leave. Finally, security forces, because he came with a number of security forces, told him he must go. And because he understood that I was suffering. I might have looked normal, but it was not normal person. And next person I remember a lot of is Colin Powell. President Bush called me. He was campaigning for re-election, and he called me. They were trying to reach me, and the communication was very bad. So they sent a special phone from Barbados to get to me so that I can answer his call. And he said he's sending Colin Powell down. Powell landed here as Secretary of State, and I was with him. And if you see the picture we had his hand is on my shoulder. The man never left my presence until he left to go back on the plane. Because I think he saw, not just talking about the aid, but he saw if I wasn't well psychologically, I couldn't do make the decisions that are necessary to recover this country. And I remember those two incidents. And I remember the British warship took me on board there in rough seas outside there. And we were trying to make contact with the population. Now, I don't think there's anything could have been worse than that period. That period taught me a tremendous amount of lesson. This one, probably most scary with the virus in terms of health, because any one of us could succumb. So it was a more frightening experience from the standpoint of safety, physical safety. But I think nothing could be more challenging than. So Andre, the answer to the right question, yes. I believe I have grown a lot because of the challenges I have had to face. And in some cases, some of the experience of the attacks, unfair attacks, I would say, because I'm one who always believe government will not be a perfect government. The Prime Minister will not be a perfect person. So he or she needs to have a vigilant press and persons willing to give constructive criticism. And that's why I talked a while ago in the context of the opposition being effectively helping themselves and at the same time effectively helping the government to govern better. And that's how I see it. But I feel I've been fortified a lot by these challenges.
Prime Minister, we don't have resources to kickstart our economy, definitely. But our resource here is basically people in Grenada. We cannot do what the US did when Obama was in office and basically print money. We can't do that. what can we do? What can be done, Prime Minister? What are you feeling deep inside can be done? What we as citizens can do to deal with the economy?
Well, I think to some extent that is being done. Because let's face it, I see we are a tourism, agricultural based economy and services as a factor. You will see from the minister's presentation that there's serious growth in the agricultural sector. In fact, I think we'll all agree. And my mom, who's 99, said that. She said, I have never seen a more balanced period of weather in this country in my lifetime. She said so. Because you get 2 days of rain and some sunshine. Some rain and some sunshine. You don't even have to have irrigation based on what's happening. So you can grow, anything can be grown. When I was growing up as a young boy, we only know about roast corn around certain period of the year. You're getting roast corn all year round now, and because the weather pattern has certainly been so balanced, particularly in this last year. So we'll see some serious increase in the nutmeg production. I understand has certainly been increasing seriously. So cocoa. And I think the general agricultural activity with the initiative of the government and the aid of farmers, a number of younger farmers I'm seeing in the field today that I never saw 10 years ago or so. So I think tourism clearly is the one that has been battered the most by this virus. But that's why we have been releasing gradually to some extent, but at the same time making sure that people understand they must maintain the protocol and protect ourselves. But we've seen some serious movements, and the hotel sector has complemented the removal of if you are totally vaccinated and you're in, you don't need to do any tests, and you're coming in. They have really felt strong, and they're telling me because of this, a number of the hotels who are not seeing big numbers for the winter season, telling me now they're filling up. So that brings more jobs, opportunities. We know I'm working with the crews to look at our vendors because they're the poorest of poor in the country, and many of them haven't had a livelihood for almost 2 years. So they are hurting and so on. So being able to get them to vaccinate so that these tourists, when they come, can visit each site that they have on their itinerary, I think would help to increase economic activity at the lowest level in the country. So I think you'll see activity there. But I think most significantly, services. The advent of St. George's University coming back, I mean, I know you could have feel the economic drop when St. George's University student went, because a lot of Grenadians benefited, whether it's the restaurant sector, the hospitality in general, or other shops and supermarkets and so on. You see the buzz. Well, they're mostly back. And hopefully, if we keep the virus out in any serious number, then certainly I expect them to continue. But there are also opportunities in education for a major project in Mount Hartman, we call it Mount Hartman Village, University Center. That could bring enormous benefits. So we've seen economic activity. And with the construction sector, the numbers I've seen, it appears to be increased by, it could be over 30-something% in a year. And you haven't seen anything yet, because if this big project gets started as we expect soon, then it means you'll see massive amount of increases in the construction sector. So I'm optimistic about the economy. Yes, we have not reached where we were in 2019, but the signs are starting to look good. So if we keep that virus out, we keep the optimism in the country about the country's investment climate, and we do what we have to do, sending the right message as a country, I think the prospects look good.
Brenda, you have another question for the Prime Minister?
Yes, I do. Staying on the topic of sending the right messages. Prime Minister, I recently congratulated a nurse for her dedication and all of that during this COVID wave. And I also said to her, you guys deserve a bonus. And she responded by saying, Brenda, the best bonus I can get will be permanent tenure. I have been on contract for the past 6 years. Now, this is personal for me. as I have had prior experience. Prime Minister, the question really is, yes, indeed, contract work is a way of the world. But what can we do in Grenada to have decent contracts? Decent contracts.
Yes.
You know, not give somebody a contract for 6 months and 1 year. What about 2-year fixed contracts, 3-year contracts? And more importantly, how can we engage with our financial institutions to treat with contract workers in a different way? That's my question.
Again, extremely good question. This is a burning issue, again, I admit, and this is an issue that we must resolve. There are two aspects of this. One, you're right, I see no reason why a 5-year contract can't be given, with conditions for your performance, right? So if you're after 2 years and you are given several notices of malperformance, then you can lose your job. I think that is one. If the government, there are approaches that can, in fact, can fortify these workers. And my feeling is, if the government decide to look at the emolument, in the contract comes the question of payment for NIS and other services. The question of leave, in other words, your contract should be based on the fact that you may not be taking leave, so to speak. And if you're not, that the size of the contract, emolument-wise, can be accommodated. So that's another approach to it. And somebody applying for a job. Now, if I'm working for 5 years and 10 years, I don't have to go and write a letter and say his contract was renewed so-and-so time, and he has a 1-year contract. And that is almost telling the bank or the institution not to give a service. So I think that's another fundamental issue. So there would be a template from government about these workers who are doing a good job, and they are, if in effect, permanently employed, not necessarily under the public service, but providing a service that the economy would always need. Then I think we will be able to solve that problem. So that's another activity that's been looked at seriously by the government. Department of Public Administration, the Ministry of Education, they are putting together a program for us to deal with coming to the 2020-22 budget.
What about nurses, though, and the whole importance of health and how we see health workers? Do you think that it is the nurses are important enough that their tenure, their sort of security, their job security, there's more value put to it?
But you do have, most of the workers are tenured. That's a fact. What you have is, because of the situation we are confronted with, that there are a number of additional nurses that have to be employed. And in some cases, when the system had a certain limits, when these nurses were qualified, they come out of training, they would have been sitting home, and we decided, look, we can take you and pay you under contract services under Grand Case or some institution like this, providing a service to the country. The alternative is to say, we don't have a job for you. And we thought this was unacceptable. But as the virus came and we needed more people in the system, many of them now are working within the system. The question, therefore, is how do we address this to make sure they feel a lot more secure than they're feeling at this particular time?
Before we leave it, though, because this one is related, this is a question from a young person, and let me read it. There is a feeling amongst young people in the public service that there is no stability or even sustainability for them, due to the fact that many of them are acting in positions they have held and performed in for years. How do you intend to address and or remedy this concern by the young people in the public service?
A very interesting question. In fact, I know the problem, because sometimes I go to a department and I ask people to identify themselves, and then start like you sitting there, I'm so-and-so acting PS, I'm so-and-so down on, I'm so-and-so, I'm acting engineer, I'm acting. I say, wait, no, you're in Hollywood. Everybody acting. Now, so I understand the problem. It is just not right. So that is a serious issue that the government has no choice to confront and deal with effectively. My own feeling, and that's where the weakness of the system, it's not just a government problem by itself, it's also a public service. The workers, some workers to some extent, also take some responsibility. Because, my feeling is the system should, if somebody's working in a job, you should be grading their performance. So if the person is not performing, how could you have them there for 3 and 4 years if they're not performing? And if they have them there for 3 and 4 years, why are they not given some permanent position if there are positions available? And in some cases, there have been positions available. So I think that is the fundamental, is a two-dimensional problem as I see it. The ability for the system to function more effectively on performance, and the ability of the system to reward the hard workers and to make sure they are more secured. Because what we are doing is also preparing a system where people are disillusioned and the system itself is being hurt. It does not make sense. So we got some work to do there.
Aruna, we're over to you now.
Mr. PM, just to piggyback a bit on question relating to youth and what have you. You are the Minister of Youth, and you also mentioned about tourism and agriculture, linking the two together. Now, if COVID has taught us one thing, it's that we can't depend on tourism alone. During COVID, I've seen some brilliant ideas coming out of people to survive. Things that I didn't know people knew how to make, they did it and did it well. Those who are especially involved in the tourism sector.
Right.
Yesterday, I posted on my Facebook page someone making breadfruit sticks. Now, over the years, we speak a lot about agriculture. But from an investment point of view, I honestly don't think we've made serious investment in agriculture the way we've invested in tourism. I've seen breadfruit flour, I've seen sweet potato flour. You mentioned about health and the need to exercise and all of that. We've heard a lot about boosting immunity over the past couple of weeks, but it also includes eating well. Our import bill is ridiculous. And what I have noticed that yes, we've been pushing the vaccine, but I have not heard enough from the Ministry of Health pushing healthier lifestyles, healthier eating, and what to do to support your immune system. Now, my question is, in terms of investing in youth and all these young people with brilliant ideas, how to make all these things from local products, when will we see some investment being pushed towards that? It can't just be cocoa, banana, nutmeg. The agriculture that we knew back then, our young people don't want to go to the land with no cutlass and no fork. They want to use machines, they want to use technology to make use of what we have here. So when will we see some serious investment in young people who are interested in agriculture, but just not the fork and cutlass method, but to use more of what we have? Organic eating is $1 billion lifestyle. People spend lots of money to buy these things. So why aren't we doing more when we have rich, fertile soil here?
Right, but you're talking to the converted. Because I live by this example. I preach it all the time, that we should be eating our local stuff, because I do precisely this. When I walked into Mount Royal several years ago, there's in the kitchen canned juice from California and Florida and so on. And we have all the ghost and everything. Say, cut that out. I don't want to see it at McGraw. And everything must be locally bought. If you get me have tomatoes from Miami, I don't want it. I want tomatoes grown here, because I know it's safer and also better, the soil, and it doesn't come with all the chemicals associated with a lot of foreign stuff. So I think that. But what is happening is I don't think the program of help is getting enough traction or information out there. We had a $7 million put last year in the GDB to help small business, and they give you a period of grace. And the interest, I think, was 4 or 5% or something like that. I can't remember the exact interest. Nobody take it. All the advertisement, it was sitting in GDB. So what we did was reduce it. Interest what, 1%? Or 2 or something like that. When we give them 3 years grace. Within 2 weeks, it was eaten up, and we now replacing it with additional sum. And that qualifies. So a young person or person who's interested in agriculture, and he or she wants a loan of 40%. In fact, we have reduced a lot of the conditions. What in some cases would you need a reference letter from 2 solid persons. Because if you start asking these people to bring in the land paper and all sorts of security, you may find very few people qualified. But the project has to be assessed. It can't be just somebody comes and say they can do this and do that, and you give them money, and that's the end of it. It has to be assessed. GDB is there. They have a section of the bank who will aid small investors like this. GIDC also is an institution. You have the National Training Agency also will provide in support. And of course, the Ministry of Finance staff would also, in the division involved, would also provide help. So I believe that there could be a lot more if more information is out there. There are funds in GDB to help to spur business. I have said to the GDB and the other banks, it's a time that there would be a window, a small window for technology. I meet young boys and girls come to brilliant ideas, and they were able to help people and promote jobs instead of going and work for somebody, because they can use the technology to provide service any part of the world to companies, which is what is being done today. And therefore, each financial institution, including GDB, should have a window and advertise. If you have a project in this, come to so-and-so. And we would look at the project and get the appropriate explanation and give you the resources that you need. Because when you expand your service, the bank is in fact aided by that development, and the country is aided by that development.
I have a
Prime
follow-up.
Minister, if I may add here, Aruna, in further response to your question, as part of the current stimulus package 2.0, there is also additional provisions to the Small Business Development Fund at the GDB where persons can qualify for an increased amount. So I think there are 2 windows of opportunity via the Small Business Development Fund that entrepreneurs, up-and-coming entrepreneurs can access.
So
By
then,
applying through GDB.
So then either the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Youth is dropping the ball, because a lot of them would say, we don't know about this. And there's this fear of, okay, if I go to the bank or I go to GDB or whoever it is, I have to bring this, bring that. There's this notion that, they would not qualify. So if you don't know, you stay away from it.
Right.
So I think with all the media,
Some have been.
so we need to do, we need to do more.
And I think that there's a partnership in all of this, because I do know that there was some level of promotion done by the Economic Support Secretariat, but we also need the media like yourselves to help carry the message. Yeah?
No, I definitely agree. There's an information deficit as far as a lot of the activities of government. In fact, it is said over and over, this government is doing so much and it does not really make a lot of noises.
I hope I'm not being facetious or anything, but just as we use personalities and so on to speak about getting the vaccine, trying to have safe sex and so on, maybe we can use them to, hey, do you know what's happening at the GDB? I got this loan for this. I did this for this. Yes. Maybe we could do that.
They did have a few people they got to come and speak, but that's a one-off thing. It doesn't work. It has to have a repetition.
It needs to be consistent
aspect to it. So the point you're making is very valid.
Just to follow up a little bit in terms of another question relating to the Imani program. While it may have some good to it, while everything is in life, there's advantages and disadvantages. Recent times I've been getting quite a number of complaints from Imani who think that they're just pushed in different little holes. Once even said to me they've been assigned to sanitize hands. And even though they're getting paid, it's not something that they feel good about. They think it's something, it could be they need to do more or be in some other positions. Now, in terms of the Manning project, when it started a couple of years ago, it was meant to be a training program. You assign someone for a year and they got training on the job, and it was secure jobs. I know people who work in the bank who went through the Manning program. But now it seems it's almost like blocking a hole somewhere. I have something to get at the end of the month or just to tide me over. But there's nothing secure. There's nothing I could do much with that at the end of the day with, cost of living being the way it is. Now, how can we improve the standard of living for Imani trainees? How can we get them to the next level?
Well, don't forget, the program was meant for 2-year training, and then you transition into some form of opportunity, not necessarily public sector, could be business, it could be some form of culture, it could be any different areas that the person shows an aptitude for. We also had a combination that government and the private sector work together, in some cases provide a combination of support for the stipend that these workers receive. That was the intention, and it worked to some extent for a period of time. 2 problems emerged. One, under the virus that we have, most businesses were limping, or some of them almost on the ground. So when they say, I can't accept, if I have any money, I can't agree to pay at this particular time. That any one of us living in Grenada or any part of the region in terms of what is taking place with businesses will clearly understand it's a fundamental problem. And I remember, it was all good intention, Instead of leaving these kids at home, you give them something, an opportunity. Some have been successful, some have not. Some of it could be blamed on the system, some have to be blamed on some of the students. Because I know for a number of cases, I can't say a vast majority, but a number of cases, where students were just satisfied, just come in and collect the stipend and they'll show up at the end of the month. Now you could easily get rid of them if the system was airtight, and maybe it's not airtight as it should be. Or you're left with a problem, where these people continue to get very little training and at the same time have a problem afterwards. The problem becomes, because of the limited activity which these people are supposed to go to at the end of their training, you're left with a choice. We kept them on, and we say, what our conscience do not allow. So sometimes make up jobs that we're doing, which is not fair, and you point out the problem. But what's the alternative? Send them home? That's to me is the worst case. The previous government in 2008, I never forget this, promised the Imani that they were treated badly, and maybe they were, because they had expectation much higher than we are able to meet. And I believe a lot of them fell for it. When the government came in, he got rid of almost all of them. And when you look at the investment for youth in 2008, 2013, as opposed to the investment that we have now, we have about 10 times the amount of resources available. So when we returned, we took the position that it's not fair to send these people home, even if they're not opportunities. The question is, how do the public service absorb in a very serious, professional way all these young people? A number of them have been adequately served, but I must say even the system has misused some of them. Because there's some Imanis that are in some classrooms for years, sometimes supplying the work of the teachers, the full-time teachers, are doing their work for them and doing so for years. That to me is unfair to the system. I'm not talking about a lot of people now, because most of the teachers are doing their work. And some cases, some of these workers have been providing excellent service. The question, how do we deal with this with limited resources and at the same time meeting the fundamental problem of not just increasing the size of the public service, which will then turn out to be a major problem for us. And so these are some of the challenges we face. They are not nice, and I could understand the concerns of these, a lot of these Imani workers. I mean, as I said, not all, but most of them are dedicated, hardworking, and conscious. But some have done well. You know, I've met Imani people who started Imani, now doctors, nurses. They're working in businesses and doing extremely well. And I think you mentioned a while ago some other areas that they have been very successful. Some have set up their own business and are doing extremely well. So we have had many successes, but I suppose to talk about success at the same time, you have to talk about those who the system has failed or who has not succeeded in the process.
Mr. Cador, we're back to you.
Thank you, fellow. Mr. PM, we're coming off the heels of COP26. We continue to have a conversation about climate change, its impact on small island developing states. And while we understand the consequences, the impact of it, sometimes the question is being asked whether or not governments and even us as a people have a full appreciation as to the realities. What sort of policies is there that government is using to guide that process, and that while we know the impact, yet we see more and more investment in tourism and more concrete jungles being constructed in proximity to the coastlines? Can you talk to us in terms of the policy regarding that? And while we're at it, on the heels of last election, there was the euphoria of oil, marine resources, and there was an excitement in the air. But we must say in the more recent times, it's either the conversation has died a natural death or something has happened that we're not aware of. What can you tell us as it relates to that? What is government's commitments to climate change in terms of policies, revamping the education system so that it falls in line with our pillars of our developmental agenda and the oil conversation?
Good questions. Clearly, I think the world understands that we must do something about climate change. I think this is an understanding that we all have come to. The problem is, in attempting to create opportunities for the people with respect to economic activity, given the traditional approach, you can't just abandon everything because you have a problem with environmental factors. So there have to be some balance and a trajectory as we go forward. The problem, the most urgent need of climate change is to stick into the negative 1.5 degree Celsius. That's the key. And what causes it? Not the buildings, the walls that are going up. What causes it? Fossil fuel. That's the problem. So the world has come to terms, and you see the fight, because some people are benefiting from production of energy through coal. You study the case of the senator in West Virginia. He's a Democrat. That's Manchin. The state he represents, West Virginia, is a coal country. You can't talk to them about getting rid of coal. So what happened? You remember last election, Biden had the campaign there because it was a fait accompli. Hillary Clinton, before the campaign, they went straight to the Republicans who were telling them they will not get rid of coal. But these are the major environmental. Coal does a lot of damage in China and other major countries to the environment. So that's one factor. And that leads me now to your other question, which is the oil and gas. The other major problem for the environment is fossil fuel. What we use in our cars is gasoline. It emits things in the air, right? Grand Lake, up to recent, just around the time we took over, if we didn't do something about it, we might have had blackouts, serious blackouts. In fact, the intermittent blackout you see now is the installation of the new major engine they bought, spent a lot of money on. And so that is being tested. So every time they test, and I told them they should be explaining to people more about this. But it's fossil fuel. And that's bad. Here we've invested $15, $16 million in something that the world is talking about to move away from. So what has happened? The world has now taken a decision that by 2034 or 2030, something like that, we want to see almost all fossil fuel out. Now, you and I know oil and gas, that's what it is. So, when the virus hit, we had drills done, we had 2 wells drilled properly already, and people spent hundreds of millions of US dollars, and they had substantial gas. It was commercially viable and so on. But these 2 wells, you can't carry a business over a long period. These guys are investing hundreds of millions of US dollars. They have to have 5, 6 wells to move. But the virus came. So what happened? Even in the United States, where fracking, or they were taking oil from the ground, they stopped. It was more costly to bring the oil up and the cost you're getting. So they closed down their wells. Several countries had closed down their wells because it was not cost effective to produce. So the same thing happens here. The guys are saying, when they come to us and say, look at the price of energy now. If I invest and spend $100 million in a well, I'm going to lose money. Does that make sense? So clearly, that affected it. Now, as the energy prices start to go back upwards, right, and which is going to happen, as supply meets demands, what will happen is the price will continue to go up. So even recently, the guys have contacted us and said they're examining other alternatives to financing their operation. But I cannot tell you that if I was an investor in fossil fuel at this time, that would be the best place to put my money at this fact. When the whole world saying we have to move away from that. The production of electric vehicles, that's where the world going. So you won't be seeing, sometime I'm driving, and I'm sure, Joseph, you've seen this, and I tell my driver, stop, because you have a vehicle in front of me. It's like I smoking 10 cigarettes. I wonder if it's oil they have, maybe they have some mixture they make to, it can't be gasoline, kerosene. So, but that's doing a lot of damage to the environment. So I think it's a serious issue. And I am not, look, Guyana, they had to adjust the production for energy value because of the same energy problem. And they have the oil, they drill already, and it's available. But the question is, moving it forward and getting it cleaned and so on, it will cost resources. So they are now downgraded the projections as far as revenue, but they're doing extremely well because they have the gas and oil already. So it is a problem, and the Minister of Finance, who was is the Minister of Energy, together with the Ministry of Public Utility, will be explaining the situation as I have given you. They will probably give you more specific in terms of numbers. So at this point, I am not very hopeful that you will see a serious investor starting to drill again immediately until he's satisfied that the output of his investment would be in his interest.
Yes. Can we see a commitment then from government to go into renewable energy?
Oh no, there's a big one.
Homeowners in their buildings.
No, Joseph, there's a big project. There's one with the European Union, a serious wind project, whatever, 15 kilowatt thing, bigger than any engine we have there now in terms of supply. Solar is going to be another one. Heat to the ground is another source. They are all alternative energy. That is where you will see a significant drop in price of electricity and a significant drop in the price of energy. Anything government does now has to be to help ease the pain as we move towards restructuring the electricity company and the question of what formula we use in the ultimate price of electricity or services to the country as a whole.
Andre?
When COVID-19 spiked here, sir, and sent the nation into a tailspin, you came out and you gave the people hope. we saw an uptake in relation to vaccination. However, at this particular point in time, the uptake is not that good. What do you think, as a nation, you would like us to do to change this particular situation now?
I think we need more of us involved. It appears someone coming in this country and they don't know what's happening, they will think this is a government thing for government interests. Because what they hear is politicians or people working inside the public service talking. I don't believe as a country we take our responsibilities as serious as it is. I honestly believe the media could do a lot more. If anything, the media, some parts of the media could be said to be guilty of doing the opposite. When I listen to certain things on certain stations, it baffles me as if we don't realize it's not about NNP, it's not about the Prime Minister, it's not about even the opposition leader. It is about life and death. And all of us should be on that wavelength. None of us should be doing anything but to protect one another. So I think we have a serious problem. I have not heard enough business community speaking. Where are they? Is it government that going to benefit directly when the businesses expand and the country free up and more activities and so on? The businesses have a lot to gain. Government will get from that, of course, and more stable countries and more investment activity. I wonder where they're. I don't believe that even among the healthcare system, I have not heard anything from the medical association. Where are they? I hope people don't get vexed when I say this, because to me, I can only speak truth. Where are they? Where are the voices? And if the lack of some open position, unlike Barbados, where the medical association, other countries have come out very strong. And then you have elements within them who are telling people they're not taking it. And that's a fact. So we have a problem there. We will need to see all our cultural artists, all our sportsmen that have influence in the country speak out on this. I believe that will be my approach. People have been telling me we need to go to Parliament and to force people. To tell the truth, if I thought that could work, I will do it. Because I have no problem with it in terms of the legality, because that has been proven. The regional legal authorities have given us the green light in this matter from opinions given. But I am not convinced that it will work. If anything, you might get more resistance. What do? Put a bunch of 5,000 people refuse to vaccinate, put them in jail? So what's the point? If you're going to do something, you want to do something to achieve a result, not to show I have power and I can demand or command you to do this. People just laugh at you. So I'm saying that I consider to be government can do, maybe our PR can be better. So a lot of people have mentioned this. Maybe we can do different things, and I've had suggestions. So government can do more. But I honestly believe we need to find a wide cross-section of all people taking a much stronger position as far as that. I have not heard the trade union movement as a body come out and tell their workers that you must vaccinate. I have not heard it. I've heard elements of the trade union movement speak to their own position on it, and that I compliment them for it. But I cannot say I've heard a strong statement supporting vaccine. I had to call out the official opposition and say, where are your position? It is not just individually to tell you and your family to support. This is life and death. And I would call out members of my own party that have been not supporting it. And I said to them, well, how can you do this when in fact it's your own people's health in jeopardy? So I believe all of us have, to some extent, have fallen short. And maybe collectively we can do a lot more.
Prime Minister, you're a player of the game, and you remain an ardent fan of cricket. One may call you a pillar of West Indies cricket to some extent. How do you respond to the team's recent humiliation at the T20 World Cup? And how do you see that impacting on the test match that we are to have here in short time?
Well, there are two different types of games. And as you can see, there are different people are picked for these competitions. I think if my observation serves me right, I think the only one person in the current test playing now that is being played in Sri Lanka. Only last night I found out they were playing a test, you know. There's only one person, that Jason Holder. Nobody else was in the team in Dubai and so on. So I think I don't see. I think you have to judge a test side on their own performance and merit, and clearly there are weaknesses there. I think it's clear that the West Indies is not as powerful a nation as in Test cricket or any form of the game as they were. It's clear to me that there are going to be some changes. A number of players have indicated that they are retiring. So they'll be looking for young talent, of course, throughout the region will be one aspect of going forward. And I believe that they will be very competitive in T20 cricket, but that's not my cricket. I prefer to see a good one-day match and Test cricket. And I believe we have some ways to go as far as that is concerned. I believe we'll make it again in T20, but I'm not sure about the prospects for Test cricket success in the near future.
Quickly here, Prime Minister, understanding the change that's taken place in the world, and we continue to hear about Black Lives Matter, and we see the pulling down of statues and monuments all over. Are we going to see change of names so as to reflect us at this particular point in time in Grenada?
We should. It's overdue. We just have to. We have had a team, appointed to examine. Sometimes I go places and I see something. They still calling certain places, and I said, "No, we ain't ready yet." So I think we have to do that. I'm clear on this that number of names we call in there now should not be names that repeat in the 21st century. So we have to move.
Prime Minister, I know you have another engagement. Brenda is trying to get in one more question. So we'll take that final one.
The next engagement, I have to wait for the one.
Okay.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you. Brenda, I have a lot more questions, but she wanted to shove 3 in.
Okay.
Let's go to education for a minute, Prime Minister. Recognizing that COVID is here with us to stay and we must learn to live with it. What strategy has your government conceptualized? Or you can share your own ideas, really, and thoughts, and how we can ensure, one, consistent education of our children, guaranteeing that they equally have access to formal instruction on content and the social development that institution enrollment gives. And that is primarily making sure that they go to school. To follow up quickly, recognizing the challenges as well and the technological transformations we're having brought on by the COVID-19, how does government propose to produce more competitive graduates, which effectively can lead to transformational development of Grenada?
Well, I think I'll give just broad answers because the Minister of Education can, in fact, speak a lot more in terms of details. But there are a lot of changes that have been occurred in the Ministry of Education. The supply of the laptops and so on to schools, a clear indication that what we have done in education in many countries in the OECS are now trying to replicate as far as the technological advances are concerned. Clearly, the whole question of modifying our educational system in terms of just trying to produce people with 15 and 16 CXCs and being so proud of that, we have to produce the type of individual who can do different things. All right, and therefore the question of technical training is going to be critical going forward. The question of also investment in small business, for example, a young person leaving school should be able to have a practical approach to agriculture. When I was going to primary school, we had kitchen garden, and we used to be planting out tomatoes and so on. So preparing people like me to be a farmer, and if not directly a farmer, but a part-time farmer in my own right, and so on. So there's a lot of changes, and I'm sure the ministry will certainly be prepared to give a more elaborate explanation of some of the things.
Quickly, our 2020 economic review and medium-term outlook lists Grenada's national debt at over $2 billion, 85% or so of the GDP. Has the economic challenges, Prime Minister, of the pandemic affected this figure significantly? And secondly, is the adoption of the escape clause of the Fiscal Responsibility Act the best decision, given that this legislation guided the country to good financial status or standing? Can you answer that?
Yes, I think the figures of 85% is not accurate. In 2019, it was 60% debt to GDP ratio, but it has gone up to over 69 now. That's the latest ECB figure. So I don't know where this...
2020, 65.4.
Right. Okay, so that's really what the situation is. So clearly we do have some challenges there, but we are certainly making. When you look at what we had to do with this virus, increasing expenditure with less revenue, it means we had to go into some of the loans to be able to meet some of our expenses, and of course that brought increases in the ratio that we just mentioned. So that's an area that we have to continue to monitor, and we are lucky because if you look at the numbers, GDP, debt to GDP ratio for many countries in the Caribbean, for example, you'll see that Grenada is doing reasonably well, comparatively speaking. And all debts are debts. And therefore, what I know, and I've always said this, some people always concern a lot about the size of the debt. That is not the key issue, It is the ability to meet your responsibility, to service the debt. I always point at people, if the size of debt was the major reason why countries should be in bad shape, America should be the worst country in the world, because America owes more debt. And every day in trillions, what we don't hear about, we never see a trillion yet.
Would you say that the using the escape clause during this period, how did it impact? Yes,
it did help us because we were able to keep our expenditure at a certain level and we had to meet certain basic rules. But this law did give us the opportunity in times of crisis that we could suspend it. And we have done so precisely, and we may have to do it again this year. Because clearly, first thing you have to do is to service your people. If you can't take care of your people, meeting some act or some law that you pass to help you to gain more money while your people suffer and go into serious economic and social problems, in the end, the society will be worse off. So first and foremost, I've always said to people, my concern always, people. Everything else, second. And that's why maybe it's one of the reasons I think people in my own constituency have continuously been voting solidly, because I think they identify the fact that I feel their pain. No, seriously, I honestly feel that. And if you are going to be working with anybody, have a relationship with anybody, the first thing you have to be able to do is understand that person and understand when they're hurting. If you don't get to understand that person, you don't know when they're hurting, you are not going to be able to have a successful relationship. And that's why I feel of a government with its people.
And finally, Prime Minister, kindly indulge me. I'm going to remove my mask so you can see my smile. This question is from me. When are you going to be removing the 24-day, 12 midnight curfew?
Well, I would love to move it because as you know, I love dancing. And I love to have a dance with you, Brenda. But the point is, I don't think we are in that position yet. I know this thing is restrictive. Let me tell you something. I pay more not for people like our age group, See these young people? They're the ones that I feel sorry for the most. Because to some extent, we've gone through certain things, so we understand. But you picture when I was a young boy, say 12 to 20, and you tell me I had to stay home for the whole day. You would not get that. Because I wasn't easy. My parents could tell you that. You go on a beach and pitch marble, and more you lose, more you want to stay. And you have to win. You go on a beach, play, you win ball cricket. You kick in football, sometimes it's ghost ball, we can't buy a football. No cricket competition. The football competition in many of the villages, they had to cut them off. You can't go to a little party, right? When time for school, I was anxious when school opening to go and meet my friends. Nothing like that. Not psychologically. I feel the pain of young people. And that's why even when they misbehave a little bit, I do not go down on them. I still have to tell them that's not right. But I understand. I feel their pain. Everybody hurting. Business hurting. Government is hurting, of course. Individuals are hurting at all levels. But the people that are hurting the most right now is the young people of the country.
All right. As we continue this final round, we go over now to Aruna.
Brenda took my question, but nevertheless, yes. To me, it still does not answer the question of when, because the state of emergency was recently extended. We're hearing we have to learn to live with COVID. It's not going anywhere. The world is moving on with COVID. Trinidad state of emergency will not be extended. And you will either swim or sink. You have to learn to live with it. Now, it does not answer the question as to why was it recently extended, the rationale behind the extension. And since Brenda took away a chunk of it, let me just throw in this one too. We have the budget presentation coming up soon. And my question is, can you give us a status of how the funds in the Transformation Fund was used in the last fiscal year? An update on that.
Well, basically, and I think it's important to mention, I heard some statements that some individuals made that we use in Transformation Fund to pay salaries. We have not used the Transformation Fund for recurrent expenditure. We have raised enough resources to be able to meet our current expenditure needs and the savings that we've had. But we are not using Transformation. It's used mainly for supporting capital projects. And to meet, of course, when we signed the agreement for the debt relief, we had to give 40% of the Transformation Fund have to go towards meeting debt. So it's the remainder we've used, and we have used it effectively. That's why you see increasing economic activity on the roads and other activities out there, because we have been using the Transformational Fund, in addition to other grants we get from friendly governments and so on. So, no. What was the first part of your question, Aruna? You made a point, I think.
The extension of the...
Yes, you see, if you don't have the state of emergency, then there are some things that you may not be able to do even in this period. So we are advised legally that we must keep the state of emergency. So when we do not want some of the things that we are implying that people must do, then of course we can remove it. So that's a decision. This thing is a very fluid situation. You remember in 1 week we had we had suggesting that we're gonna 2 days of quarantine, and then within a few days after, members came back and looked at the figure and said, look, it doesn't make sense, because right now of all, we see how many thousands of people coming into the country. And when you're doing statistics, you look at the numbers. Out of that, only 4 persons have been found to have been affected out of all the thousands of persons. And in some cases, most cases, there were people that were unvaccinated. So if you structure it and say that only vaccinated people can enter at this particular time, and if you are, then you don't have to come in. Together with the PCR test you walk in with, which is negative. And on the other hand, if you're not vaccinated, then it means you'll have to spend 7 days at least quarantine. And I think that is therefore an encouragement. And remember, one of the things we must repeat, the bigger countries are saying, from January, almost everyone's saying, unless you're vaccinated, forget coming.
So you're going to encourage to take it off?
Yes.
I could take off the mask while I'm here with you. Is that an encouragement?
Yeah, Brenda, I have to be careful with you. Yes, I really, you finish it? Kado?
No, just one question I have to throw to Mr. Prime Minister.
Yes.
Healthcare.
Yes.
It has always been a topical conversation. And I think COVID-19 has exposed us on all fronts.
You're right.
Of the current state of our healthcare system. There was a conversation at one time as to health insurance, it being serving as a vehicle to address those issues of addressing preventative care. What is government's position on the health insurance conversation, and what specific plans are there to really and truly provide us with a robust healthcare system that could address, if in fact we have to live with COVID, then certainly it is a conversation that has to start now and in full effect.
Yeah, the national health insurance is seen as a priority. It will be revamped. Hopefully that's the system we hope to receive in the end. The healthcare system, and to providing basic services and getting people who can afford to pay for the services. Right now we're subsidizing almost everybody. And the system we have, while we spend a lot of money, we're still not doing the optimal job of providing the best health care that we can. So that is a fundamental problem that we have. So the national health insurance, only because of the present situation where we have to be financing all the consultancies and so on to get the system up and running, and we had to indicate to the persons involved that the present situation requires to be spending money dealing with people's fundamental social and economic problems, and we couldn't be funding the advent of the National Health Scheme. So it's on hold while work is being done on a private level, and hopefully post the next period, we'll be able to look at specifically continuation and completion of national health insurance. But I'm satisfied if we get this CT scan. By the way, I made a mistake a while ago when I talked to the government buying the CT scan. It's not the government. The Maria Holder Memorial Trust Fund is the one who donated. And it's a very costly thing, so I don't want to take credit for government. That is definitely donated. The CT scan is one of the most modern ones in the entire Caribbean region. Secondly, as you know, as I mentioned before, dialysis. I mean, I've seen so many people suffer and sometimes, some cases die because of the advent of diseases that brings on dialysis is problem, and the continued need to get dialysis and every 2 days is a major problem. It's not cost effective for a family to be able to meet that fundamental. So that's one we'll be given top priority, and in 2022 we expect to see the opening of that facility. But we want it to be a combination of private sector and government. And the people who can afford to pay must pay. Those who have private insurance must use the insurance to pay. And we must not, because every life is important. So the poor fellow who has no needs, you can't tell him because he can't pay, he must die. That can't be. Any society that says that cannot be a responsible one.
Prime Minister, the ECCB, understanding the negative impact that COVID had on the region, the ECCB, they cut the interest rates to the banks. However, the banks did not pass that on to the customers. What are Caribbean governments going to do Are you guys going to go to the banks or go to Parliament and pass some act and say, banks, you need to be dealing different with the citizens of the country or the various territories?
I must correct you. The CCB did not cut the allowed rates that the banks can charge for deposits. What they reduce is if they have to lend money to the governments, they have in this period decrease the interest from 5% or 6%, they made it 3%. That's what they did, is the value of them, but they were not dealing directly with what the bank's intervention with the bank, because they have the power, but they have to be careful what they do, because the bank's in business to make money.
But Prime Minister Motley has been saying that, hey, the banks are killing us in
No, we
these
accept
territories.
that, but just making the point that they don't, it's not the same thing to say that the banks should have cut because ECCB cut, because ECCB don't fund the banks. So they just gave government. And government says, in the case of ours, we got $6-something million, 3%. Each country got based on its GDP. Antigua got the most. And they made it at a lower interest rate and for these countries. So we could unlend, private sector could have got monies out of that too, that low interest rate. The banks, I think one of the problems I see with the banks, as far as I'm concerned, because I see it in my own case, where you have deposit in a bank, and every time you get you deposit your statement, they take out $25 for. I don't understand what they're taking it for, because you're paying. The interest is hardly negligible already, and you using my money to lend to people at high interest rate, whether it's commercially and otherwise. And not all banks, certain banks that have done it. And I think to some extent the question of charges need to be looked at seriously by government together with the ECCB and the banking institution throughout the entire OECS.
Yeah, I think that was the final ball of the over. So
last one.
He certainly did.
I'm not allowing the Cinderella thing anymore. I have a glass slipper. 12 midnight. Turn into a pumpkin. PM 2 a.m.
Let's see what happens for Christmas, Brenda. Christmas coming.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Joseph.
Thank you, Joseph. Good advice for Brenda. Prime Minister, your final thoughts, comments this afternoon. I thought we've had a very good conversation with these media representatives here.
Yeah, I thought the questions, guys, I want to say that I want to compliment you and thank you, because I think you brought out a lot of searching questions, which gave us the opportunity, me at least, the opportunity to explain some of the fundamental problems. And I hope I was straight with you in giving you the answers as I see fit, because I don't think that the trust is a major factor. If I say something to you here, it must stand the test of time. And therefore, I appreciate this special session. And I continue to look forward to, Press Secretary, to sessions of this nature. And I think we hope to have one more session before.
Yes, we'll have one more in December.
Maybe with different groups of persons, but certainly I value this session and communication with the public of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And to our listeners and viewers, we have now come to the end of this evening's press conference. Thank you so much for spending part of your Sunday evening with us. Thank you to the media colleagues in the room who have come out and, as Prime Minister indicated, asked the very searching questions on behalf of their various audiences. Thank you again to the GIS production team. Until we see again, everyone, do continue to be safe.